Greetings, friends. As those that watch know that as soon as I start talking, my dog Bodie always wants to get in on the picture. Come on, lay down, pup. Good boy. Today's talk is on the Ratana Sutta, one of the most famous suttas. And again, as Buddhism developed over the last 2,600 years, and even during the Buddha's time, there's been adaptations and accommodations and embellishments made to the Buddha's original teachings that sometimes and oftentimes alter the Dhamma in ways that make it not as immediately useful as it was during the Buddha's time. Of course, the suttas, as they're preserved in the Sutta Pitaka, the second book of the Pali Canon, really do represent in a remarkably direct way the teachings of the Buddha. The important thing there is to remember the context in which the Buddha taught, and in order to understand any of the suttas, we have to remember and understand what the Buddha meant by dependent origination, that it is from ignorance of Four Noble Truths that all manner of confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering arises. And so he taught Four Noble Truths to end ignorance. So it is the entire Buddha's teaching is contained in that very first teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And then he spent 45 years teaching in that context, in the context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths, in a situational way. So when we understand the context and have wholeheartedly engaged with the Eightfold Path, that keeps us focused, and it continues to provide the proper context for understanding any sutta and for our daily Dhamma practice. So the Ratana Sutta, the setting, it's linked in the Ratana Sutta is linked in the email from this week, and it's also easily accessible on my website if you want to read the whole article. I won't, but just to provide the setting. The Buddha heard of some folks that were beset by natural disasters and resulting disease that came from that, and so there was an awful lot of suffering. And the first thing the Buddha did when he came across these folks was to instruct his monks and nuns to attend to their physical needs. And once they were done, then he gave a teaching. And that's an important thing to understand as an example for our own Dhamma practice. Part of Dhamma practice is organizing our life for practice, meaning it's important to take care of our physical well-being. And it is as important as taking care of our mental well-being. That's part of Dhamma practice. So it's easy to fall into the trap of which is really a form of asceticism, of overemphasizing Dhamma practice and de-emphasizing the practical needs that we have. The Buddha taught the Eightfold Path as the middle way. That's how he declared it. It avoids extreme views, which might result in asceticism or overindulgence. And again, the framework of the Eightfold Path guides us. So in this setting, the Buddha first had his monks and nuns, as I said, attend to their needs. And then he gave this sutta. Now remember, these people are under severe stress and suffering. They're very confused. And like today, it was common during the Buddha's time to misunderstand karma, even if we're looking at it that way, that these things befall us because of something that we're doing wrong, whether it's individually or as a group. And an understanding of the Four Noble Truths states that dukkha occurs as a consequence of having a human life, including being exposed to natural disasters, being exposed to sickness, aging, and death. This is how Buddha explained dukkha. So there's nothing personal in what has happened to this group. It's simply a consequence of having a human life. So the Buddha's Dhamma now, and taking true refuge, when it's understood this way, begins to depersonalize the way we are looking at ourselves in relation to the world. The Buddha never held himself out as someone to be worshipped or as a having any extraordinary powers or being a god, or having powers that are granted from a non-physical realm to the physical realm, which is, again, this is a common belief during the Buddha's time, and it's very common today. And I won't get into the history of why that has occurred, but one of the reasons why I'm teaching the Ratana Sutta now is kind of at the conclusion of the last four topics that in general were how the Buddha taught an authentic Dhamma despite what was coming up around him. And this is another example where he just puts the focus. Now lay down, folks. Where he puts the focus back on a true refuge, meaning taking refuge in the Buddha, that a human being has found a way to awaken, to understand the result of ignorance. And again, the Buddha never held himself out as anything other than a human being who figured this out through his own efforts. He would often describe himself as a rightly self-awakened one. That's so important. He did it himself. And so we can do it himself through the second refuge of his Dhamma. Now, of course, if we're going to use an awakened human being's Dhamma, we must be authentic to his Dhamma. Once we start changing it or adapting it to fit cultural or charismatic individual views, which is really what has happened, we end up in what is a incredibly confusing thicket of views, using the Buddha's terms. There's an article on the website called Modern Buddhism, a thicket of views, that gets into this and explains how it happened. So the Buddha's there, and he addressed that group. May all beings assembled have peace of mind. The Buddha gets right to the point, that the point of his Dhamma is developing peace of mind. It's not in any way to manipulate the three marks of existence or to hope to gain favor by gods in order to manipulate what cannot be manipulated, what is simply a natural consequence of having a human life. May all beings assembled have peace of mind. May all beings assembled listen mindfully to these words. May you all radiate goodwill and loving kindness to all who offer help and understanding. Understand this: there is no more precious jewel, no more refuge, no more comfort than the Buddha. As woodland groves in the early heat of summer are crowned with blossoming flowers, so is the sublime Dhamma leading to the calm and peace of nirvana. Nirvana, or nibbana, simply describes an awakened human being's quality of mind. And nibbana or nirvana literally means to extinguish. And what the Buddha is referring to is that we have extinguished the fires of passion, rooted in self-referential views, which are rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. This is the sublime Dhamma leading to the common peace of nirvana, the peerless and excellent awakened one, the teacher of true understanding. The teacher of the Noble Eightfold Path is the Buddha. Again, he's taking himself now in this triumvirate of the three refuges as saying, I'm a human being. I know the true nature of life and within the three marks of existence, and I teach a Noble Eightfold Path. This is the one who has awakened. So here the Buddha is teaching worship, not teaching worship of himself. The Buddha often referred to himself as the Tathagata, which simply means the one who has gone forth and left the world behind. This means that the Buddha has gone forth from distraction and ignorance, from stress and suffering, to well-concentrated wisdom or understanding. He liberated himself from clinging to all objects and all wrong views. Through his own efforts, Siddhartha Gautama awakened to become a Buddha. The Buddha is here offering himself up as the example of one who has gone forth on the Eightfold Path and awakened. Again, the Buddha is emphasizing that I'm simply a human being. I did what I'm going to tell you to do. If you do the same, you will awaken as I have. Taking refuge in the Buddha is understanding that all human beings can go forth from ignorance and attain wisdom and right understanding. There is great protection and comfort in understanding that liberation and freedom is possible for all human beings. That we understand that there is great comfort and protection is the meaning of true refuge, that there is something that offers us comfort and true protection from what's occurring in the world. And that doesn't mean that if someone throws a rock at us and hits us, it's not going to hurt. Of course, it's going to hurt. This is a way, the Dhamma is a way of seeing the indiscriminate and impersonal events of our life in a way that is rooted in right view. In other words, we cease taking anything personal because nothing is personal. The Buddha continues, there is no more precious jewel than the teachings of the Buddha. Now, of course, that makes sense. If we're taking refuge in something, we wouldn't take refuge and then tear down the refuge. That would be foolish. But that is exactly what has occurred even during the Buddha's time and the 2,600 years that has unfolded. We have literally torn down the refuge of what the Buddha left, his Dhamma, because of the compulsive need to substitute something else that will allow for continued eye-making. And so we have taken something that was a true and authentic refuge and literally torn it to shreds. The Buddha, calm and mindful, has experienced the cessation of clinging and desire. The deathless state of nirvana has been attained. The Buddha teaches the noble Eightfold Path that unfailingly brings concentration and liberation and freedom. There is no precious jewel than the Dhamma. Again, those are the Buddha's words. And then the Buddha continues, there is no more precious jewel than the Sangha. Understanding this brings true liberation and freedom. The virtuous ones who bring the Dhamma, they are the jewel of the Sangha. Those with steadfast mind, free of clinging, they are the jewel of the Sangha. Those that understand with wisdom the Four Noble Truths, they are the jewel of the Sangha. The Buddha is emphasizing that the true jewel within the Sangha is a teacher that actually knows the Dhamma. Of course, how could a teacher that doesn't know the Dhamma, and you can't know the Buddha's Dhamma unless you actually study it or learn from a teacher that has actually studied it, rather than study the adaptations and accommodations and embellishments that we now know have literally destroyed the true refuge of what the Buddha taught. Those that gain true insight and abandon self-delusion, doubt, and indulgence in meaningless rites and rituals, they are the jewel of the Sangha. Meaning a well-focused Sangha is the only Sangha that we can take refuge in. Any other type of gathering, and I won't call them a Sangha, are simply groups of people that have come together to reinforce their own views as opposed to the right view that the Buddha taught. And that is simply what's occurring. And oftentimes, and this was common during the Buddha's time and just as common today, a self-referential ego self, a mind rooted in ignorance, will use the fact of large associations, meaning the more people that have agreed that this is what it is, whatever it might be, that gives it validity in our own minds. And it gives us justification for professing something that is now no longer a true refuge. Now, just a little bit of my own direct experience in this. I took vows in a certain Tibetan lineage over a rather long, elaborate process, and culminating in a three-day ceremony at a monastery somewhat local to me in New York State. And I'm being a little bit circumspect, as I don't want it to sound like I'm bashing that lineage. And I certainly don't want to sound like I'm just bashing Tibetan Buddhism. I'm not. They're legitimate religions. They just do not relate to what the Buddha taught. They have changed what the refuge is. And my point is that I took my vows in this certain lineage, and part of taking those vows is committing to or vowing to take refuge. The difficulty was that the Buddha was described during this long, elaborate ceremony as someone that I need to worship and appeal to and gain merit towards in order to awaken. As far as taking refuge in the Dhamma, the actual teachings of the Buddha were never taught. In other words, the context was never laid out for me to understand. The Dhamma, the way it was presented, was simply a series of so-called mystical mind states to acquire and appeal to, and the Dhamma itself was set up as finding and appealing to certain deities, which of course the Buddha never taught. And then as far as taking refuge in a well-focused Sangha, because that particular Sangha had no understanding of what the Buddha actually taught, and the people that were teaching that had no understanding of what the Buddha actually taught, there was no true refuge. I was taking refuge in a group of people that were wonderful. They were committed to that particular religion, but there was no refuge in the Buddha's Dhamma, so there was no refuge in a well-focused Sangha. Just to go back, those that gain true insight and abandon self-delusion, doubt, and indulgence in meaningless rites and rituals, they are the jewel of the Sangha. The Buddha is talking directly. When I read the Ratana Sutta quite a few years after, well, it wasn't that, maybe a year after that that ceremony, I simply realized what I was missing and how misinformed I was. Those beyond despair and evil doings, they are the jewel of the Sangha. So the Buddha is not beyond despair, meaning that we are no longer desperate for self-establishment because we understand the futility and the hurtfulness of trying to establish that which can't be established. It's the Buddha's words on meaning of anatta. It's anatta, as the Buddha uses it, is simply stating that the views that we hold describing a self are wrong views. They don't constitute a self. They are not a self. Hence the word of use, using the word anatta. Those whose understanding arises from the support of a well-focused Sangha, I put those two words in there, well-focused Sangha, who can no longer conceal the truth from themselves. Such an important line. We can no longer conceal the truth. The Buddha understands that people have been engaging in rites and rituals and practices and religions and so-called spiritual disciplines in a way that conceals the truth from ourselves. And I would say conveniently conceals the truth from ourselves, because then we don't really have to change. We don't really have to look at the problem of continued eye-making. We can continue engaging in so-called spiritual or religious practice and comfortably continue eye-making. Who can no longer conceal the truth from themselves due to the Sangha, the importance of a well-focused Sangha, and the danger of a Sangha that is not well-focused, that can only lead to more confusion and delusion. And so this leads to a profound understanding of individual responsibility. If we are wholeheartedly engaged in the Dhamma, and we are truly taking an understanding from the Dhamma that relates to our responsibility to ourselves and to all others, we will in no way be able to mislead or misinform other people as to what the Buddha actually taught. That is the most compassionate thing. And a lot of that goes on by simply, by tacit approval, by through common association, giving credence to what is no longer a true refuge to the Dhamma. And that's one of the cruelest things that anybody who has knowledge of the Dhamma could do. Last night's talk on the Kulasakaka Sutta is a perfect example of the directness of the Buddha arising from his great wisdom, now married with compassion. Compassion without wisdom will often lead us to continued ignorance by being more concerned about not challenging people's beliefs because we feel that we might make them uncomfortable, or even worse, that they may no longer like us or listen to us. It's far more important to be authentic to the Dhamma that we know to be a true and authentic refuge. Those whose understanding arises from the support of the Sangha, who can no longer conceal the truth from themselves due to the Sangha, they are the precious jewel of the Sangha. Those whose karma is extinguished, the future of no concern. What a wonderful line. Karma extinguished and the future now is of no concern. With rebirth ending, due to the support of the Sangha, this is the precious jewel of the Sangha. I think I'll end it there. That's the Buddha's final words. In the article, there's a little bit more commentary on that. But the whole point of this talk and the whole point of understanding the Ratana Sutta within the setting that it was given, but also in the context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths, is that we can only take refuge in these three jewels, in these three refuges, in the way that were intended. And so this is how the Buddha intended his Dhamma to be, and the example of his own life. They must be seen clearly. They must be directly engaged in the way that the Buddha intended. And as people developing the Buddha's Dhamma, as taught by an awakened human being, I'll use the word, have a grave responsibility to remain authentic to that Dhamma. So we will be on retreat for beginning Thursday and ending on Sunday. So there won't be any class online or in our center in Frenchtown Thursday or Saturday, but I will be streaming the sessions from One Dharma Center, providing that that the connection there's been some connection difficulties up there in the past, but I think I may be able to work through them and stream live our session. So the schedule is on the website, and it'll be sent out in Thursday's email. So hopefully some of you can join us while we're on retreat. If you find benefit from these talks, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you all. Peace.